Hi, in this video we're going to talk about the interface. This is broken up into two sections. The first section I call Interface Fundamentals. This is where we're going to take an in-depth look at rotating, zooming, tumbling, accessing the brushes and accessing our brush controls. Basically the core skill set that you need to have to be able to navigate and sculpt in ZBrush. Then in the second video section, we're going to look at the interface overview. And that's more of an optional video. That's one that just goes in and looks at every single menu and gives you an overview of what tools within the interface you're going to use and which ones you won't. So we'll begin with this interface fundamentals to get us quickly started. Some of this stuff you'll already have seen if you've worked through the quick start video, but it's nice just to revisit it and just to have it as a separate video that you can come back and look at, because one of the important things when you're first learning ZBrush is to be able to quickly master this interface, which is actually a much shorter learning curve than it might at first appear. So to begin, I'm going to go to the light box, I'm going to go to the tools, and I'm just going to double click the polysphere. That makes the polysphere my currently active Z tool. I'm going to draw this on the canvas, and then I'm going to immediately go into edit mode by either pressing the edit button here, or you'll see that there's a tooltip that says the hotkey is the letter T. Press the T key and now we are in edit mode. See, this floor plane is turned on. I'm going to turn that off for right now. Anytime you hover over anything in ZBrush, it will give you a tooltip, and that tooltip will tell you if there's an associated hotkey. Also, if you press the control key, it will give you a short manual page for each option, which is very, very handy. So the first thing that we need to understand is how do we navigate inside of ZBrush. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at how to rotate. Now, it's not easy to see this because it's a sphere, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to turn on polyframe mode so we can see the polygons of this sphere, and it'll be easier to see as it rotates. If I mouse over here to the background, you see my cursor is a circular arrow. If I click and drag, I'll rotate the object. Rotating is as simple as that. Just click and drag on the background. If I want to move the object around, press and hold the Alt key and then just click and drag on the background, and that moves the object rather than rotates it. So click and drag rotates, Alt click and drag moves. Now the trickiest one is zooming, and this is based on the Alt click and drag. If I press Alt, press and hold with my tablet pen, then let go of Alt and continue to drag my pen up and down, I will then zoom in and out of the object. So let's repeat that. I hold down Alt, press and hold with my tablet pen, then let go of Alt and continue to drag my brush up and down. That zooms in and out of the object. Now it is possible to hold down the control key and right click and drag with your mouse or your tablet pen, but I don't recommend this because most of your hotkeys are centered around the Alt key anyway. So if you keep your thumb there on the Alt key, you can easily access your other hotkeys as well as the space bar, which you'll see that we're also going to use. So I recommend just getting a handle on this particular hotkey combination. Alt, press down with the tablet pen, let go of Alt, then click and drag. In all the years of teaching ZBrush, I've seen people struggle with this key combination at the very, very beginning, but consistently it takes them about an hour to 2 hours of just playing in the program to really get their head around it, and it becomes second nature. So we've seen how to move, how to rotate, and how to zoom. So let's take a look at some other things like how to focus in. So if my mouse or my object is way off screen like this, I can press the F key for frame, and that reframes it into the center of the screen. That's the same as using this button here, frame. So if I'm over here and I want to frame it, I just click frame. Now, let's say I want to turn on my X symmetry. So when I'm sculpting on both sides of the model. To do that, I press the X hotkey, and now you'll see that I've got two dots on either side of the model right here. So I'm going to turn off frame mode, and I'm going to change my material. I don't like this red wax material, so I'm going to click the red wax shader, and I'm going to select Basic Material 2 here. That's my favorite material. You can change your material representation by simply clicking any of these swatches here. You can change to other materials. My favorite again is this one here, Basic Material 2. Now I want to snap to an orthographic front view. You see, ZBrush is not like other programs where you've got a front, side, top, and bottom camera. ZBrush has a single view, and if you want to get an orthographic, you snap to that view. So the way we do that is just a little combination that's done when we're rotating. I'm going to turn on the floor plan with this button here so we can kind of orient ourselves to the model more easily. And I'm going to go to the light box and I'm going to change now to the dog. Just by double clicking the dog tool, it's loaded the dog tool and it's switched it out with the sphere. So I want to snap to an orthographic front view of this dog. To do that, I click and drag on the background to start rotating. And as I get close to the front view, press and hold the Shift key. Now ZBrush will snap to the closest orthographic view. Now don't let go of the Shift key because that'll just bounce you right back to where you were. You need to lift up with your tablet pen, then let go of Shift. So that key combination again, if I want to snap to an orthographic side view of the dog, I'm going to rotate towards the side view. Then I'm going to press and hold the Shift key. That'll snap me to the side view. Let go of the tablet pen, then let go of Shift. If I want to change from perspective to orthographic, I press the P key, and that turns my perspective on and off. When you're sculpting, a lot of times people ask me, should I be working in perspective or should I be working in orthographic? What you do is you work in both. You will train your eye, especially if you're doing a lot of work for 3D print, which I did a lot of when I was working at Gentle Giant Studios back in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. I did a lot of work sculpting for 3D print, and to get accurate objects, to get an accurate sense of volume and scale and proportion, I found that it was integral that you always work with both the orthographic and the perspective modes. You start to train your eye to really see what's working and what's not and be able to eyeball your proportions. And it's simply a matter of experience. I do think if you work all the time in perspective mode, you will miss some things, just like if you work all the time in orthographic mode, you won't really be able to judge your objects. And it really doesn't sell them that well when you take screenshots or you do renders if you do them with an orthographic view rather than a more dramatic perspective view. So we've seen now how to rotate, how to zoom, how to snap to orthographic views. Let's look at how to access our brushes now. If I press the B hotkey, that brings up the brush menu. And here you can see is a list of all the currently loaded brushes. Don't be overwhelmed. There's a lot of options here, but really you're only going to probably use about 5 brushes. I personally find that out of all the ZBrush brushes, there's about 5 or 6 that I consistently use. The same is true for painting and for painting and traditional sculpting. I have a huge box full of sculpting tools, but I have about 5 that I consistently use when I'm sculpting in clay, and I've got about 6 paintbrushes that I use. So don't be overwhelmed by the sheer number of tools. They're simply there for special occasions. The core ones, most likely for you, are going to be the standard brush, which is B for brush. Press S for standard, and you'll see that limits the number of brushes now to just those brushes that start with the letter S. Standard is right here. It's actually already selected, but if you see there's a little T hotkey next to it, if I press the T key, that selects the standard brush. So the brushes that I like to use are the standard, inflate, clay tubes, dam standard, and the move brush. So if I wanted to select the move brush, I'd press B for brush, M for move, and there you can see the move brush. It's the second to last because they're in alphabetical order. And that brush is marked as the letter B. So if I press the B key, you'll see up here I've now selected the move brush. I'll turn on X symmetry, and I can now make changes symmetrically using the move brush. If I want to select the inflate brush, I'll do the same. B for brush, I for inflate, and there you can see the inflate brush, the key is the letter N. So I press N, and I now have the inflate brush selected. Making a very muscular dog now. So when you're selecting brushes, it's very important to be able to control their size, the focal shift, and the intensity. Now up here at the top of the screen, you see we have these sliders to do just that, but I don't recommend coming up here for those. While you're sculpting, let's say we're using the standard brush. See how quickly I can change that brush, just BST. Now I'm on the standard brush. If I want to change my draw size, press the space bar, and that brings up this quick menu, and this is really fantastic. It allows me to change my draw size, my focal shift, which is the fall off of the brush, the RGB intensity, which we're really not going to use until we talk about painting, and then Z intensity, which is the strength of the brush. So if I turn it up and turn the size down, it's a very strong brush. If I turn Z intensity down, it's a very weak brush. You can barely see it there. There we go. Now, you can change it to Z add or Z sub, but I recommend not changing these settings because always your brush is going to default to Z add, except in some very limited cases like dam standard, for example. If you press the Alt key, your brush will subtract. So you don't really need to change that setting. Just press the Alt key. If you let go of Alt, your brush is adding. If you press Alt, your brush starts to subtract. So that's the spacebar menu. Now there are submenus here. So if I mouse over draw size, you see the hotkey for that is S. And if I mouse over Z intensity, the hotkey for that is U. Now some people will use the S key to change their draw size and the U key to change their Z intensity. That's fine. I prefer just using the spacebar because it's right next to my finger when I'm on the Alt key for navigation. So it's right there. I can just do what I need to do and then be back to sculpting. I don't have to move my hand over and press U or press S. But that's completely a matter of personal preference. Those hotkeys are there if you choose to use them. So that's the core fundamentals of the interface. You'll need to understand how to save your work. You can do that by pressing Control S, and that saves a project file. And a project file saves everything that's currently open. So if I were to save a project file right now, it would save the dog as well as the sphere that we were working on before. Any textures and alphas that we had loaded in ZBrush, it basically saves the entire ZBrush session, including your camera, or excuse me, including your camera position here and the background image of your viewport. If I go to Tool, Save As, that will save a Z tool. That only saves the currently selected Z tool and any textures that happen to be assigned to that tool, or any poly painting, and that is all. And those are the two methods of saving your work out of ZBrush. So that concludes this interface fundamentals. That's the core things that you really need to understand for navigating in the program and working. If you haven't already watched the Quick Start video, I do recommend taking a look at that because we see these things being used in context, and you can work through an entire project sculpting a character head using the brushes, using the hotkeys, navigating, etc. I recommend it just spending a couple hours playing around with sculpting on a sphere, and you will master the navigation much, much faster than you might expect if you're first coming to this. So that concludes this quick introduction. Now we're going to move into taking an in-depth look at the interface as a whole. So I'll see you in the next video.